Joining us in studio today is John Vsetecka, PhD candidate at Michigan State University. John just flew into the United States last Tuesday after spending nearly 6 months abroad in Ukraine and Poland. He and his fellow American grant recipients were in Ukraine working on research and teaching projects when they received word from the U.S. Embassy that there were threats of a war looming from Kyiv. So, John, wow, thank you so much for being with us. You've only been in the United States for a week now.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. As some background, can you let us know how exactly was it that you were in Ukraine when you received word that those threats were looming? What is it that you were working on there?
Right. So I arrived in Kyiv, Ukraine in October of 2021, and I was in Ukraine as part of a Fulbright grant program, which is an intercultural exchange where artists, academics, and others go to carry out research and teaching projects. And so I was there as part of the 2021 cohort. And I was there to do research for my dissertation, which was supposed to last until June of 2022, but obviously I didn't get to stay in Ukraine that long due to the war starting again in February of 22.
While you're there, your professor receives word from the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv that a war is looming. When you heard that, what was that like? How did your professor express that to you, and what was the reaction from you and those who were staying there?
Well, I actually texted my professor and told him that I was being evacuated. You know, it's a scramble when you're evacuated. I don't think anyone there, none of us certainly expected that the war would get to the capacity that it has at this point. And I spend every day with Ukrainians. I still, to this day, message them every day. My landlord, my friends, now it's turned from "Are you okay?" to "Are you alive?" And these are the realities of the war. And before I left, they thought it was crazy that we were going to be leaving Ukraine. They've had this kind of Russian presence on their border for much of their lives, and especially the last few years. And so for them to think that war was going to happen in the way that it has now, it was incomprehensible at the time. And certainly not very many Ukrainians believed that that would happen. And it really took the bombs falling to make that very clear that the war, in fact, was happening in the way that it was happening now.
So you receive word that you need to relocate, you go to Poland. We have all seen those videos on the news and on social media of how hard it has been for people to get out of Ukraine. Was that your experience, especially as an American? Were you able to get to Poland pretty safely? What was that like?
Right. So I have the privilege of an American passport. So I had no problem exiting Ukraine. And this was still when people thought it was premature to leave. I experienced no issues getting to Poland and finding a place to live. And that's certainly not the case for Ukrainians who are leaving Ukraine now.
You told me you actually opened up your home. Who came to live with you? What was that experience like? How many rooms did you have? How many people were there?
Right. So we jokingly call it our commune now, before I left. But I had good friends who were living in Kyiv, and they had just had a baby. And their baby, Sophia, she's 7 weeks old this week. And they made a harrowing journey from Kyiv to Warsaw over the course of about 10 days. And I was in touch with them, trying to help them get across the border, because these border lines are, they're very long and they're very difficult to cross. And so I was in touch with them, and they would send me messages about, okay, the air raid sirens are going off, so that means the bombing's about to start in whatever region they were in. They sent me pictures of them with the baby, hiding in bomb shelters and in closets. So these really dramatic images. And they were really the reason that I started working with refugees, is because I just happened to be in Poland when this war really started. And so they came to live with me in Poland. They got there safely, and we had a one-bedroom apartment, and we arranged a couple of beds around the apartment, places to sleep and to crash. And we also had a friend from Kyiv, my neighbor, that came to live with us as well. And so the four of us and the baby all lived together in a small one-room apartment because housing was so hard to come by, and I had already paid for the apartment. So it was a way that I could help out Ukrainians that were coming into Poland, and they didn't have to spend their money on a place to live, at least for the time being.
Is there anything with the war in Ukraine and the refugee crisis in Poland right now, is there anything that you think people in mid-Michigan and the U.S. should really be aware of?
Yeah, so there are lots of things to pay attention to. The scale of this is just unimaginable for most Americans. There are over 3 million refugees that have fled Ukraine. Over 2 million of those are in Poland right now, hundreds of thousands in other countries, and they won't stay there forever. And we don't know how long this war will go on and what kind of homes and lives Ukrainians will be able to return to. And so they may be out of their country for a long time. And at some point, many of them will come to the United States, and we really should prepare to welcome them and host them when they get here.
Mm-hmm. Your friends, they're still in that apartment that you left. Are you in contact with them? Do you know what their day-to-day is like right now?
Yes, they are still there. I talk to them every day. They send me pictures of their daughter. And my friend Anya, her family actually just got to Poland from eastern Ukraine. So now they're hosting more refugees, their family. So they're doing the same work. They're helping others, helping family, and they're still living there while they get their visa sorted out to come to the U.S.
Okay. There's a lot, thankfully, of great resources to help out with Ukraine and the refugee crisis in Poland, but is there anything specific that you would like people in mid-Michigan to know, ways that we can help and reach out?
Absolutely. The best way right now is if you have a little bit of money to donate this. A few dollars goes a long way for Ukrainians and those still inside of Ukraine. And I worked with one organization when I was in Poland. It's called For Peace. And it's an organization that a friend of mine started. It's just volunteers that raise lots of money, and they're able to get these medical and humanitarian supplies across the border in just a day or two. And I worked with them, and they're phenomenal. There's another organization called Razum, and this is an organization that also is doing great humanitarian work, as well as the World Central Kitchen, which has makeshift kitchens in Poland and in Ukraine that really, their job is to feed populations as they're going through this war. So to provide just kind of this basic element for human life, they're also doing really good work.
Okay. We'll make sure to get both of those linked with this story on Fox 47 News. That'll be up tonight. John, you've only been back in the United States for a week. Truly, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.